The furry community is a cosplay and art group that centers around the concept of anthro-animals. This community has millions of members that draw in almost all walks of life. Over the decades, the community has grown massively, more than ever before in its history. I covered in one of my older videos how people with physical and mental disabilities have found comfort and sanctuary in the fandom, but today, I'll be covering a minority whose presence is very significant in the furry community. Research today reports that 1.3 million adults identify as transgender in the United States. That is less than 1% of the population. A study surveying the furry fandom population reveals that 12.2% of furries fall within the category of transgender, which is more than 20 times higher than typically observed in the general population. So what exactly about the furry community draws in transgender individuals? Why is this very small minority so highly represented in this cosplaying and art-driven subculture? That is what I would like to discuss today. Transgender is a term and identity that has been frequently discussed within the past few decades, but for those who aren't familiar with what being transgender is, allow me to briefly summarize. Someone who identifies as trans typically feels that the gender they are born in doesn't align with how they feel inside, and they may want their physical appearance to match. When someone feels that their identity is different than the sex at birth, or assigned sex, this phenomenon is known as gender dysphoria. For those who experience gender dysphoria, they may consider themselves transgender. Expressing their true identity physically can have a powerful effect on trans individuals' self-esteem and mental health. Experiencing satisfaction and joy through becoming their gender identity is referred to as gender euphoria. But not all that identify as transgender experience gender dysphoria. But how do trans people experience this gender euphoria? The process of going from the gender they were born with to their newfound identity is referred to as transitioning. The process of transitioning doesn't always mean getting something as permanent and as expensive as surgery, especially when it comes to underage trans youth. Transitioning can be done in multiple ways. Some are non-permanent steps, such as choosing a new name, changing pronouns, and wearing different clothes and hairstyles. Others include medical treatments and procedures to change hormones that halt the effects of puberty with hormone blockers. But these medical interventions are more limited for minors. And as we're about to discuss, there's a very interesting phenomenon where gender expression can be explored using fursuits or fursuits. I'm about to bring on a few awesome participants who are willing to share their experiences on being transgender and how being a furry helped them feel more comfortable being themselves. Also, a quick note, this video has mainly the perspectives of trans men, simply because they're the most accessible group of people who are willing to reach out and share their stories. I also just happen to have a much larger pool of transgender men than women in my following, so there is an entirely different perspective that I wasn't really able to capture in this video. But if there are any trans women watching that would feel comfortable sharing their thoughts in the comments, I would love to hear, because it is very important to include them in the conversation. If I make a part 2, I can try and better include that perspective. But yes, the first user who reached out goes by T, and he is an artist and fursuit maker in the fandom. I'll let him share his experiences from here.
Hi, my name is T. I'm an artist. I draw silly little cartoons. My pronouns are he, they, or they, he, whichever one you want to use. I identify as non-binary or trans. I don't really care which of the other. I started figuring out or questioning my gender identity when I was very late in middle school or pretty early on in high school. I kind of came out to everyone I knew in sophomore year. Most of my family was like okay with it. They don't refer to me as my given name or pronouns or anything like that. My mom tries to, she just forgets. And my dad doesn't really believe in the whole non-binary thing, but they both still love me to death. All my friends were very accepting of it and almost immediately started using the new name and pronouns, or at least getting used to it. I feel like I'm a lot luckier than some others are in this situation, so I'm very blessed to have the response I had. I first started finding out about the furry community before I even questioned my gender identity. I found out about the furry community in about elementary school, late elementary school, early middle school. I really got into it because I would draw a lot of animals growing up. I was really into things like My Little Pony and Five Nights at Freddy's, and all that just kind of mashed until I found the furry community, and I've just stuck with the furry community. It's a huge part of like my identity and who I am and who I keep around me pretty much. My persona's name is Katori. He is this emo white and black hellhound. He's pretty in tune with my gender identity. He has these rib cage markings, and the top ones are supposed to be like hidden top scars. But I have a secondary Sona who is my main fursuit. His name is Jamie, and he is supposed to be all my trans identity jumbled into one little fuzzball. He is the trans colors. He was a charity build. The maker got none of the money, and it was all donated to charity in someone's top surgery fund. And it's just such like a blessing to go out in this character who represents my most of my trans identity, and most people, or not most, but a lot of people recognize that he's the trans colors, and it feels good to go out with this character and this suit that I poured a lot of money into charity for, essentially, and it's just a blessing to have this character around. He means the absolute world to me. Yes, I feel like wearing a very like more masculine presenting suit does help bring out like euphoria. I've never really been questioned about my gender identity. I've never really been referred to as female pronouns in suit before. I can even go and wear a dress in suit and I feel super comfortable. Unlike if I weren't wearing that suit, that security, I'd feel a lot more uncomfortable. But with the suit on, I feel a lot more secure. Absolutely. They're so accepting of it. I've never really been questioned about it. They're like, okay, cool, you're a guy. That's good for you. I feel like a lot more of my furry friends are a little bit more accepting than my, non-furry friends are. Most of my friends, or no, all of my friends are very accepting of my identity, but I feel like the furry community has a lot less like slip-ups in like pronouns than compared to people who really aren't furries or involved in the community at all. And this isn't supposed to rag on my other friends. They're the best and I love them to death, but I just see more positivity in the furry community. Honestly, it seems like something you would learn in like preschool, but just treat us like how you would treat a cis person. We're not any different. We're not higher, we're not lower, we're just the same as everybody else. Just because we're trans and identify as something we weren't born with, that doesn't make us any different than anybody else. Pronouns and stuff, I agree, it can get tricky to adjust to someone's new pronouns, and slip-ups are bound to happen, and that's okay. Trans people won't get at your throat, or at least most won't. And, like, as long as you don't, like, say the wrong pronouns intentionally, we're not gonna care. I don't even notice most of the time. Just treat us with at least the basic human respect, and I feel like that's such a good start.
What are your pronouns / what do you identify as? I identify as a trans mask. I mainly use he, him, but sometimes I use they, them. When did you find out you were trans? How did your family or friends react? I found out when I was 15, but I didn't fully come out until I was 18 or 19. The reactions from my family and friends were honestly mixed. Some were very supportive and enthusiastic, but a majority were unsure and overwhelmed with such a sudden change. There's people in my personal life who still need more time to process and accept my identity, but none of them have ever directly stated they don't support my trans identity. When did you join the furry fandom and why did it appeal to you? I joined the fandom in 2021. It definitely was the fursuits that appealed to me the most. Describe your persona. Does your persona reflect your gender identity? I have multiple personas. I would say my main and my lion sona heavily reflect my gender identity. My Shiba Sona, which is my main, represents my core self, more soft and feminine, like how I am in person. My Lion Sona is based on my transition and also references how biology is even a spectrum in the wild. There are actually some lionesses or female lions who grow manes like how male lions do. Does wearing a fursuit help with gender euphoria? For me, wearing a mask fursuit helps me experience a lot of gender euphoria. It conceals the parts of myself that I'm insecure about and exaggerates the parts of myself that I'm confident with. Does your friend group in the furry fandom accept your trans identity? Are they more accepting than normies? My entire friend group are very accepting of my trans identity. A lot of them are trans themselves. They're so much more accepting than normies. what would you like to tell people who are new to learning about trans people? What I would like to see from cis people is them being more comfortable with asking pronouns. Hey, what are your pronouns? And just being used to being upfront about talking about the pronouns that they actually prefer. I noticed it's still a hard topic for cis people to bring up. I've personally always found it easier for people to just ask what someone's pronouns are and then act accordingly. It saves a lot of stress for everyone, trust me.
So, what have we learned? The general takeaway I've gotten from the participants who've reached out to me is that transgender people are heavily stigmatized in American society today, especially within the United States, where, for many people ignorant of the reality of trans people's daily lives and experiences, their understanding of this community is based on anti-trans rhetoric used by many politicians. This leads to the trans community feeling very unsafe, but it isn't just rhetoric. Anti-trans legislation is being proposed nationwide to many websites, and many websites track the amount of anti-trans laws happening. One example is that this law would deny trans people's access to passports. This official government website reads, if you submit a passport application requesting an X marker or requesting a sex marker that is different from the sex marker at your birth, you may experience delays getting your passport. We will issue you a new passport that matches your biological sex at birth based on your supporting documents and our records in your previous passports. There have been stories coming out about trans people getting flagged for having fake IDs at airports, and there are currently legal battles over this specific issue. The day-to-day lives of trans Americans are getting harder and harder. Misinformation regarding the use of medications like hormone blockers, which have been proven safe and used since the 1970s. This has led to their banning in spite of having been used on cisgendered kids for various medical reasons with little to no real harm. There is also the fact that the government is attempting to redefine gender terms. Under the presidential action of defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, their definition of biological truth is as follows. Female means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the large reproductive cell. Male means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the small reproductive cell. These narrow and unscientifically written definitions have been debunked and scrutinized by both legal experts and medical experts. Executive Director of the Institute of Health and Research Policies explains that sex is not a singular, binary, immutable trait. It is, in fact, a complex cluster of multiple traits, some of which align with each other and some of which do not align with each other. These definitions also completely leave out intersex people from the picture. This population faces issues due to the fact that these laws refuse to acknowledge the complexities of human biology. Another very disturbing action being done by the executive branch is rewriting and scrubbing of trans people and their existence in history. The Department of Health and Human Services made an effort to remove references to transgender people from its websites, including the CDC's, but was halted by court order. Another strange action done was the removal of transgender people from the U.S. Park Service's website covering the Stonewall movement, which is a very famous piece of American history that couldn't have happened without the leadership and influence of trans people like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. The State Department and government agency web pages have gone out of their way to remove terms gender and use sex, as well as taking out the letter T from the term LGBTQ. These actions being done are attempting to set back decades of progress done for transgender research and includes gender nonconforming individuals. Nowadays, many people are concerned about these actions being done to the trans community, especially because this systemic erasure isn't new. Transgender people have been targeted by authoritarian uprisings in the past. In 1919, Hirschfeld founded the Institute of Sexology, an academic foundation devoted to sexological research. At the time, thousands of trans patients were seen and treated, often for free. By 1930, it would perform the first modern gender affirmation surgery in the world. Along with these breakthroughs in research, they provided treatment for alcoholism, gynecological exams, and sex education. But once Nazis got into power, this groundbreaking research was targeted by that regime. Allow me to read from Scientific American how exactly it happened. When the Nazis came for the Institute on May 6, 1933, Hirschfeld was out of the country. Troops swarmed in the building, carrying off a bronze bust of Hirschfeld and all of his precious books. which they proceeded to pile in the street. Soon, a tower-like bonfire engulfed more than 20,000 books, some of them rare copies that have helped provide a historiography for gender nonconforming people. It was among the first and largest of the Nazi book burnings. During the broadcasting of these burnings, voiceovers from the footage declared that the German state had committed the intellectual garbage of the past to the flames. For the Nazis, the ideal genetically superior humans were white, cisgender, and heterosexually masculine. Any who strayed from this identity were considered depraved, immoral, and worthy of total eradication. But putting into context both the dark history and what is happening to their community in America today, is it any wonder why trans people might want to look for a safe space to explore creativity and gender identity without judgment? This group of people, when given the love and support they need, are able to live very fulfilling lives. But I understand if the concept of being trans and transgender and gender exploration is confusing and complicated, and you can't just seem to relate to it. As a cisgendered woman myself, I don't know what it's like to have gender dysphoria firsthand. I've personally never felt like I don't belong in my body, so I get if you can't fully understand it on a personal level. But the thing is, trans people don't demand that from you. Trans people want to be treated with kindness. They just want to be included and validated. They want you to understand that every trans person's experience is different, and all-encompassing assumptions are not helpful. If you try your best to use their preferred name, their pronouns, and just treat them like everyone else, that's more than enough. Trans people aren't immoral and depraved. They're human beings. Even if you don't understand their struggles personally, they're very real and they need to be acknowledged. And fortunately, the furry community happens to be a group that embraces the trans community with open arms. The furry community is known for its fluffy, cartoony fursuits and the fact that you can make your own fursona, which is an alter ego representation of yourself as an animal. Usually people create an animal version of themselves as a performance and as an artistic expression, but many individuals can use their fursonas to play around with how they want to be perceived. Let's say, for example, you were born a woman and you are thinking you could be a transgender man. You haven't transitioned, but you just want to know what it feels like to be perceived by people as more masculine. But maybe cutting off your hair and changing your name, clothes, and pronouns feels like a bit too much of a commitment. Dressing up as a masculine furry wolf persona character for fun could be much easier of a way to experiment and play around with that feeling. Imagine you're now walking around a convention as a male furry character. Other people refer to you as the pronouns of the character you're dressed up as instead of your own pronouns. People will see you walk by and think, wow, look at that cool wolf guy. He's awesome. I want a picture with him. They don't see you as the girl you're typically seen as in your everyday life. It's different, and you experience that sense of gender euphoria. It's a safe place to experiment with identity expression, with the ability to take the costume off and still be your original self. A lot of transgender people who enjoy being furries have probably felt this sensation before, with both assigned female at birth individuals and assigned male at birth individuals, and even people who identify as cisgender. Being a furry and dressing up as an animal doesn't necessarily mean you want to become the gender of the character you're dressed up as. Sometimes it's just a fun way to play a character. This feeling of creative expression and safety draws people in. It's just a fun cosplaying space and doesn't always have to be so deep. Like for my friend Maple, she has a male fursuit named Maverick and another named Azu. She dresses up as those male characters for fun despite being a cisgender woman. She doesn't have any desire to be trans, but she just likes dressing up as her own character. The furry community opens a gateway to explore your identity safely and artistically. Furries are drawn to expression and fun colors and gorgeous costumes, and they don't tend to care at all what's in your pants or how you express your gender. It's generally a very tolerant environment in that way. And as we've described, the trans community is currently facing civil rights violations, discrimination, and hate from the general public. So if something as weird and as harmless as a group of furries can help those feel safe, then that's the best thing we can do. But as we've seen, those in power and authority want to frame this group as immoral and remove transgender people from history and disrupt ongoing research for the community. Just staying informed about the topic is an incredible way to help. Do not spread misinformation, and make sure to trudge through long articles and read books based off of trans experiences. Listen to their stories with an open mind. It's a very small step to help this community feel safe and welcome, which ultimately is what everyone wants. But yeah, that's the end of this video. I would love to thank everyone who participated in this episode. I really appreciate it. If there's any information I left out or anything I got wrong in this video, please feel free to correct me. I want to be very, very careful with my wording and do not want to be responsible for spreading misinformation on an already misunderstood group. Also, I really apologize for the audio quality in this video. I have a very cheap microphone and I'm hoping to invest in a nicer one in the future. But yes, let me know in the comments what you would like me to write about and cover next. Bye.